are literally shaping the planet.
Purpose is the only pathway to a regenerative future.
We have a choice to stay with the status quo or to change.
What is the point of trying to be just resilient when we can actually innovate?
So we are going to talk software today. We're accepting Brian's challenge. If anybody was in Brian's presentation just a few minutes ago, he's challenged us to attract nerds to the built environment, and we are doing that. And not just software nerds, but energy nerds as well. So we're going to talk about a different flavor of sustainability than he was mentioning. I did get a kick out of his description of the all the dumpsters parked around green construction sites. But this is not about construction, it's about operations of buildings where we also need to step things up. So let's just see if I can operate Zoom. Hey, that's me, and that's what Nick just told you, but I left that in so that folks can have it if they download the slides. I'm happy to share the slides with anybody. So I promise not to end on a depressing note, but I wish to begin on a realistic note. The world is changing, and in many ways, not for the better. So I'm sure the wildfires in California have made the news wherever you live, but then it's off the front page and it's just more background noise, right? There's plenty of trouble in the world. But if you live here, it's pretty visceral. I've lived in California for 35 years and my wife has lived here all her life. We're here to tell you this is not normal. This is not what wildfire season used to mean. Wildfire season used to mean that in the fall you had to be careful. Once in a while a fire would start and it last for a few days or even weeks, and it would be tragic, and that would be that. But now fires start every year and they burn for months, and we have an entire season where wildfires are burning all the time, not just a risk of, but actual fires all the time. Of the 20 most destructive fires in California history, all were since 1990. 13 were since 2015. 4 were since last month. This is a picture taken at noon on September 9th, 2020. I went outside in my front yard, about 20 miles from the Golden Gate Bridge. And, I looked straight up at the sky and could not find where the sun was. If you think this is normal, you're not paying attention. So we've done this to ourselves and we have to stop. So what does all this have to do with buildings? Well, a lot. Buildings in the US contribute 38% of all CO2 emissions and have other impacts on air, water, and land as well. And that's not sustainable. So it's not just the dumpsters at the green building sites that Brian was talking about. It's also how we operate our buildings and how we make them cleaner in the coming decade. And we're going to talk about one aspect of how buildings can do that. Buildings use 68% of all electricity on our grid. But the good news is they can do better. Building rooftops can host gigawatts of solar, and they can operate a lot more cleanly and efficiently than they do today. And while I know we have a lot of architects and construction folks in the audience, this is not just about new buildings. We can put solar on existing buildings and retrain the operations of existing buildings to save money and carbon. So is it the case that our industry innovates more slowly than others? Well, perhaps, and with good reason. Construction is hard, changes slowly over time. So I'm not picking on construction because I don't like new buildings. I love new buildings, like so many people here at this conference, but it's because it's the old buildings that are having such a negative impact on our environment. And unless we want to tear down all the old buildings and start over, we need a way to reduce the impact and improve the operations of existing buildings. And that way is software. Unlike construction, which of necessity can only improve relatively slowly through the construction of new marvelous buildings, software can intervene and make significant changes and improvements to existing buildings very, very quickly. So it's in the retrofit market in existing buildings where the biggest impact can be made most quickly on sustainability and emissions in buildings. Even just looking at small commercial buildings where we do a lot of our work, the potential is enormous. The National Institute of Building Sciences has identified, I think over 35 billion in cost-effective energy retrofits in small commercial buildings with potential to save tens of millions of tons of CO2 emissions every year. Now, the good news is that exploiting this market will not only support hundreds of thousands of jobs, it will save building owners over $100 billion in utility bills over the next decade. So this is a win-win-win for the environment, building owners, and employment. But we're not just talking about changing light bulbs or blowing insulation or glazing some windows here and there. We need intelligent sensors and networks and software to change how the buildings actually operate. The last generation of energy retrofits was all about physical changes. Like I said, better insulation, high efficiency equipment and lighting and so on. But the next generation is not just about the total amount of energy you save. It's about shifting when the energy is used. It's about controlling devices to prevent stupid operational mistakes and wasteful consumption. And it's about using artificial intelligence and advanced control algorithms to operate the building optimally all the time. And it gets better. Even that is just the beginning. To realize the full energy potential in buildings, we need to move them from being passive utility customers to being dynamic energy producers and consumers or prosumers. Small buildings are ideal for this. While small buildings have half the floor space in the US, they have almost 90% of the roof space. Think about that for a minute, and you'll understand why. The Empire State Building has enormous total floor space, but really no more roof space than a two-story professional office building. So when our partners look for opportunities for solar installations, they're talking to small to medium buildings almost exclusively. You might never win an architectural award for designing a car dealership or an elementary school or a two-story professional office building, but that's where a lot of these emissions are coming from. That's where solar makes a lot of sense. That's where we're working today. And to take buildings on this journey from being a passive customer, buying whatever dirty power the utility is selling, to a dynamic producer and consumer of clean, renewable energy, we need to teach buildings to learn from the past, predict the future for better control in the present. That's easy to say, hard to do, but it used to be a lot harder. Today, most commercial customers are on smart meters, so we have amazingly detailed historical usage patterns that we can use to do machine learning on the energy using behavior of each building. We have amazingly detailed solar models and satellite data from which we can build a hyper-local solar forecast of the output and building usage. And while we have cheap and abundant cloud computing, we also have cheap networking and IoT frameworks through which we can send optimal control signals down to the building and to all the energy using subsystems within that building, modifying the flexible loads of each building to match that building's own solar generation. I know, that's kind of a mouthful, but we'll get back to why that's important in a minute. On a more positive thing I can say about being from California is that we are out in front on a few clean energy trends, and solar is the biggest one. So if you've looked at solar a few years ago and thought of it as some exotic, expensive option, you were right, but not anymore. California has good sun when the weather's not orange and high utility rates. So commercial solar has been at least moderately popular here for at least the past few years. But in the rest of the country, it's just taking off now. This is one of those phenomena that everyone knows but doesn't remember, which is that exponential growth can continue for years from a low base before anyone really notices, and that's what's going on in solar. The price of solar panels and associated equipment has been dropping at almost 30% per year, has reached a tipping point where it's now cheaper than coal or natural gas at utility scale, and it's becoming economic on residential and commercial buildings now in many states. And the result is a market opportunity that really comes along only once in a generation. If you think of all the solar that's ever been deployed in the US over the past 45 years, that's a big number. Now multiply it by 6. That's how much is going to be deployed in the next decade alone. That's a $1 trillion opportunity in the next decade, or as I like to say, $2 billion a week for the next 10 years. For people with trouble with trillions, that arithmetic is correct. This is a big deal. So the rest of the solar industry is doing its bit. Residential's done fine. Utility scale is doing great. And commercial buildings have to start pulling their weight now. However, commercial buildings have some issues too. So solar alone is not necessarily economical for some commercial buildings today. You and I pay for our electricity bill by the kilowatt hour at home, right? But a commercial building might pay up to half of its total electricity bill for the month on the highest 15-minute usage during the whole month. So that's called a demand charge. And if you think about that, up to half your electricity bill could be based on the worst mistake your building makes all month. And with solar, that doesn't get any better because solar is great at saving energy, but not demand. One cloud can ruin your whole month. The worst mistake your building makes could be just as bad as it was before the solar goes in. And yet, somehow, less than 2% of all buildings in the country know anything about demand. They don't monitor their own demand. They don't monitor their own solar if they're on solar, and they operate without any means of saving demand. Now, with all the money we've spent on Johnson Controls and Honeywell and Siemens and Schneider and all the other energy management systems, how can that possibly be? Well, it's because even well-behaved buildings have no idea. They kind of, well, they live in the present, okay? They don't know the past has happened. They don't know the future is coming. So they just act like more or less a big thermostat. Here's a building with solar that is selling back solar during the day and using solar in the evening, late afternoon and evening when the solar has dropped off and the building load has not. So that's fine. You sell back, you buy, but here's the worst mistake of the month, and that's very expensive. It need not be so. You really only have to shift a bit of that energy usage into the times when the solar is abundant to save a ton of money and demand on the same building. So this is saving thousands of dollars per month in every building where you're able to do this kind of load shifting. It can make a huge difference in the economics of a solar system. So solar pays off better if you're able to combine it with smarter control of the building because you're saving on both the energy being produced and that nasty demand charge I just described a minute ago. If that sounds like a battery, it is like a battery, right? But it's a battery without permitting and a battery without master electricians and a battery without retail space in the building and fire suppression and all the other things that make batteries in commercial buildings so expensive. It's a 10 times cost improvement over batteries when combined with solar to deliver better savings on the utility bill, better savings against carbon emissions, and a more sustainable building. I'm coming up on my time, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining how it all works. There's fancy math that goes on here and control that comes down to the buildings. We do a lot of monitoring of different parts of the system to make it all work. I'm just going to get to the good news that I promised at the end, which is that once you open up the market for commercial solar, we can save not tens of millions of tons, but billions of tons of carbon emissions from buildings. We can clean up the grid, we can clean up the built environment, and we can shift energy from dirty to clean in time to make a difference at my house. So I'll stop there and take any questions that we might have. I see participants. I see nothing in the Q&A. Nick, do you see anything in a different queue?
I don't yet, John. Let me see. Let me check our Slack channel too.
Okay, great. And I'll just leave my contact information on the screen. If anybody does have questions, you can hit me up, john@extensibleenergy.com, or there's my phone number. call me anytime. Hit me up on LinkedIn too. So, am I correct that your company can retrofit to existing solar arrays? Yes, can do either one, a new array or an existing one. No problem.
John, I have a question, just kind of how your conversations, for your business have changed as a result of COVID. And then, I mean, now the forest fires, I think, are even, it seems like that would be even a bigger accelerant. But yeah, can you just talk about like the change in trends of behavior for some of the corporates that you've worked with and spoken with?
Yeah, definitely. So we primarily go to market through our partners who are solar installers. I can't build a guys in ties enterprise sales team to go knock on doors saying, would anyone like to buy some load flexibility software? It's not really something they know what it is. So we go to market with our solar installation partners. COVID was tough at first. It's good to be in software. We were able to manage the transition ourselves pretty easily, but some of our customers ran into our partners ran into a lot of restrictions going into buildings. But that was sort of a Q2 thing. Everything picked right back up again in Q3. So we're getting lots and lots of deals brought to us by solar installers again now. The conversations with corporates are therefore indirect. I don't sit down across the table with somebody with thousands of buildings and ask, why aren't they doing this? So we go through our partners for that. But what we've heard is that it's very different sort of market by market and segment by segment. We work in all kinds of buildings, office, retail, church, school, conditioned warehouse, all this stuff. And so the folks who are the most constrained right now, I'd say by far, are the schools. The school business is entirely just so disrupted by trying to get kids either back in the classroom or taught remotely that there's no one paying attention to these kind of issues. Whereas office, retail for sure. We do some business with car dealers. That business has been excellent. Churches coming back really fast because they know they are going to come back, and so they are able to spend a little time now on retrofit work. So it varies really dramatically from one segment to another.
Gotcha. I see a question from Jag. What is a good mobile solar system?
I don't know.
Is there a plug and play installation system for a house?
Yeah, I don't know. We don't do any work in residential because residential doesn't have any demand charges. So, I mean, there's just literally hundreds to, actually thousands of residential solar installers who can answer that question better than I can. You should go with someone local. There's no advantage to a national firm doing solar work. Anybody who's been in business for at least a decade and is working locally will know your market better than I will.
Gotcha. So one more question for you from me. So if a company or if you're just you're an individual with the decision-making ability to start adopting some of these practices that you laid out.
Yeah.
If I'm focused on like Pareto principle, like what is the 20% that's gonna be most impactful? If I have limited budget, or if I don't want to rock the boat and like do a full on 100% sustainable initiative, but I can get buy-in for a little bit. Like how would you advise someone to tackle that game plan? What is the 20% that's most important?
Yeah, so definitely the largest OpEx line item in almost every real estate, every commercial business is energy charges, right? Utilities take up a ton of the OpEx budget of most buildings. You can get out from under most of that by working with a reputable local solar project developer. They can structure it in such a way that you can either pay on a power purchase basis or with a capital outlay. So it depends on your tax appetite, depends on everything else. But I tell you, solar and good software pay back faster than most of the other sustainability initiatives that I've seen. And you can, again, you can combine that with a lighting retrofit or other kind of energy saving stuff. But I gotta say, if you can't do a complete sustainability initiative, you should at least be attending to lowering your electricity costs. And this is in probably, I don't know, 35, 40 states now, a pretty low hanging fruit for that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I see, what do you mean by residential doesn't have demand charges? Doesn't it, especially in California? Nope. So demand charges, again, are the charge based on the highest 15 minutes of use during the month. Residential customers do have time of use differentiated energy charges, which means 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. costs more than the rest of the day. But that's different from a demand charge, and it's difficult to shift enough energy in a residential facility to make as big a difference as I was just showing with the commercial. So happy to talk to whoever anonymous attendee is, but that the economics of our business work vastly better with commercial customers. And the other question I see is, are this company's revenues based on SaaS or of some kind? There's no upfront consulting or setup fee, and yes, it's based on SaaS, which is priced primarily based on a shared savings model, and it varies from one site to another. We charge more for saving more.
John, that's great.
Yep.
Thank you so much for your time tonight. This was very informative and honestly very timely.
Yeah,
I think this is a really important conversation.
I gotta say, people have to get wise to this stuff sooner than later, and that's not about our business. That's about the bigger sustainability push in the built environment. Anyway, thanks a lot, Nick. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, John. Appreciate you coming out. All right.
Thanks.